Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to see people in the flesh and to see people also online. Welcome to our online participants and welcome to those of you that are here this morning. We're thrilled to host this event. My name's Denise Cahill. I'm the Healthy Cities Coordinator here in Cork City. It's a great honour to be part of this partnership, which is a diverse group, and I'll explain who we all are in a moment, but it's such a pleasure to be hosting an in-person event here this morning on a beautiful morning in Cork City for those of you that are joining us overseas. We have many people coming through, I'm sure, eventually online. There was 120 people have registered for the online participation, so we'll be hosting both, which is wonderful this morning. Thank you to David S., who is going to be our online host and will be there to help anybody with any technical difficulties in terms of the online group. And our colleague Grace Walsh is also online for your assistance as well. Thank you, Grace. I can see Grace has her camera on there. For those of you in this room, it's very strange to be doing a hybrid event. I've never done it. So for those of you that are here with us, as I say, my name's Denise. We also have Dr. Helen Lynch from University College Cork and Alice Moore, who's also with the Department of Occupational Therapy in University College Cork. And we've Martha Halbert down at the end of the room from Cork City Council. So the four of us have been working together to put this programme together, with Teresa Casey, who is with us online, unfortunately, and not in the room. We're so disappointed that we don't have her here this morning. So we're going to be winging it. So we'd ask you to be really patient with us, and we hope we can pull this off effectively in both formats. So we are going to start. I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of background about why I'm involved and why Let's Play Cork, which is a partnership here in the city, and how we established. And then I'll be handing over, actually I'll be handing over to you to get to know each other. And then I'll be handing over to Dr. Helen Lynch. So just to kickstart, hopefully my slides will work. Yeah. So how this all began in terms of our involvement here in Cork around Let's Play Cork was an URBAC project, which is a European funded project around play and the development of play in Cork City. And there's loads going on in play. And I suppose it was only when I started delving into this project that I realized how much actually is already going on. And my own perception of play was very limited. I certainly was thinking of play as playgrounds and something for children, and how it's evolved over the last, we'll say, 4 or 5 years during this project. So URBACT is a European project. The way that URBACT works is that one lead city, a demonstration city, provides, I suppose, a platform for other cities to learn from them. And our lead city was the city of Udine in Italy. And we were really privileged to learn all about how you can develop in a playful way at urban level. And we did some work to bring that about here in Cork. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it. These are our partners. And I suppose this has been the key. We have a fantastic partnership, a genuine collaborative partnership, and one that's been really positive for us here in Cork. We have Cork Sports Partnership, which has been a fantastic organisation to work with. Katrina Lane and formerly Cahill Garrity, who now works for the ETB, have been great champions of this approach and in supporting this playful approach. And I suppose in really helping us to source funding and to source national commitment to this as an approach. We have the Learning City. We've Let's Grow Together, which is an early intervention project in the north side of Cork City, based in Knocknaheeny. Catherine Harford, who manages that project, is here today as well, and Grace Walsh, who's the occupational therapist attached to that project. we've learned a huge amount in terms of child development and early development and the role of play in that. Of course, we have Cork City Council, and Martha Halbert is our key person there in the community directorate and with the social inclusion lens, and Larkin Griffin, who's a planner. And it's great to get planners on board, and it took play for Healthy Cities to really engage with planners in Cork City Council, so we're delighted with that as well. And of course, Feroiga and the youth focus as well is one of our partners. So we're a dynamic group. I forgot to mention as well, we have Eileen Cassidy from the Library Services in Cork City Council. She'll be with us shortly. I just didn't see her face, so I forgot to mention her. So the way we've approached Play in Cork is Urbact is great because it's kind of an experimental process. So you can try things out, and what we felt in Cork is it gave us the permission to do things a bit different. And, you know, as a public servant and as, you know, working in a public service, that can be really challenging at times. To be courageous and to do something a little bit different, because we're bound by a lot of bureaucracy in a lot of our organizations. But Urbact gave us loads of scope to be playful, I suppose, and to try something different. So what we tried initially was not to close the marina, but to open the marina up to Play, which is an area of Cork City, for those of you that don't know it, in Blackrock along by the river. And it was an area that, you know, was there's a large road, and there was occasional cars used to drive down through it. So the car dominated the space. So what we did for 4 Sundays in October in 2018 is we closed the marina to traffic, but we declared that we were opening it for play. And this was a huge success. You can see here in the pictures, people really enjoyed it. And so much so really that there was huge momentum around it, and the space became permanently pedestrianised ultimately. Now, that didn't just happen overnight. That was a process that involved getting councillors on board and policy and a shift in Cork City Council. And Cork City Council were really behind this and really drove it, which was wonderful. And I suppose we like to say that gave the city some confidence around pedestrianisation. And when the COVID pandemic hit here, you know, internationally, here in Cork, we were able to respond quickly in terms of pedestrianisation. And there has been some fantastic moves in the city centre now around pedestrianisation. And I think this gave, you know, a bit of impetus and a bit of courage to try that as well, which is fantastic. So we like to claim that. We've also delivered some play leader training through Cork Local Sports Partnership, and there is play leader training coming up. And that's really that's where I suppose a lot of us who, you know, hadn't worked in the space of play really developed our understanding about play and how important it is for all ages and across the generations. And that play leader training is available and is as I say, available to anybody to attend. I think it's delivered online as well. We also dabbled in trying school streets, which was all about trying to remove traffic from the gate of schools and trying to show that if you take cars away from the front gate of a school, what can happen for children and what can happen for everybody. Firstly, you're clearing the air, which is really important. You're getting rid of all those exhaust fumes, but you're also making the space fun and accessible. So we trialed that, and that didn't come without its headaches, and that is a challenge because people are really, I suppose, attached to their car in the morning. And, you know, we all have that quick kind of fast commute where we're trying to get children into school early, but we forget the impact that our behavior can have in terms of their fun and their experience of the space as well. And that was a huge success. And then we did some pop-up events, opportunistic. There was a collapse of a building in the city centre in July 2019, and a street was closed. So we opportunistically brought play to that street, and we were invited by, again, Cork City Council, City Centre Revitalisation, to try to animate the space. And we did that with chalk and with the assistance of the fantastic Hazel Hurley. we chalked it up and we invited people to engage with that space in a playful way, and that worked out really well. And then the pandemic hit during our back project, and we wanted to bring play to people while they were under restriction and in their homes. And we were particularly concerned, I suppose, with children from families that needed extra support from early years and certain childcare facilities. So we targeted families most in need, and we developed play boxes for those families to allow their children to play. We developed a play booklet, and we put resources into this pack. And then we were concerned, I suppose, as the pandemic continued, in terms of the first winter. We knew that older people were struggling, and we really wanted to engage with older people. And Katrina Lane and Martha Halbert really drove this fantastic play pack for older people as well, which I have to say, to this day, when we meet some people who received these packs, they still talk about how much it meant to them, not just in terms of being able to engage in play, but just the fact that people cared enough to reach out to them. And that was a wonderful initiative, again, supported by University College Cork, where, you know, we did a survey with older adults. We asked them what they wanted. And you'll see later on this morning, there's a video of we've a video around play, but in that is an older couple who involved in an online singing initiative to, I suppose, connect them during the pandemic, which came out of this play box. And then there was ultimately a performance. That's what people had said in the survey, that they'd like something to look forward to at the end of the pandemic or at the end of restrictions. And we were in a position to host a kind of a concert for these older people to come together and perform what they had been doing online for the duration. So you'll see some feedback from that later on. So you can see some nice happy faces there. And then this is something that we're launching next week. Katrina, again, has been very involved in this. This is the development of the play bag, and Cathal Geraghty, who's also here this morning, we're very involved in, you know, packing up this bag and finding resources, play pack basically, full of play resources that all 10 libraries now in Cork City have to loan out to communities. So if you're part of a community group or a residential group, that, you know, you have access to borrow this for free, and you can bring play to your area. And that's going to be launched at last 2 years later. We were about to launch in March 2020, and we all know what happened. So we're ready to go with this now next week, and it's being launched in Ballyfihan Library as part of the Lifelong Learning Festival, which is really exciting. And then finally, I mean, throughout our journey with Urbact, we were engaging with the assistance of Helen Lynch in University College Cork, and Helen was always, I suppose, patient and great in terms of developing our understanding of play and the importance of play, but the importance of inclusion when it comes to play. And that's always been to the fore in terms of our work. So we had the opportunity with the Cork City Development Plan to try and engage children. And the Cork City Development Plan is a 400-page document that most adults won't engage with. So we wouldn't expect children to engage with it in the traditional sense. So what we sought to do with the Cork City Development Plan is to engage children in a playful way. And Cork City Council engaged with the Glucksman Gallery in University College Cork, and again, during restrictions and online, through schools and through DESH schools, and, you know, targeting specific groups of children out there that wouldn't easily have a voice, I suppose, in the development of a city, around if they were the Lord Mayor of Cork City, what would they do, and how would they develop the city. So their artwork and their suggestions were received. There was over 2,000 submissions from children across Cork City. Cork City Council had never received that many submissions from children before. And to bring that project to its fruition, you know, it was lovely to have the artwork and to display it. we were really keen that those voices were brought together and themed and submitted. And Helen and her students in University College Cork spent 50 hours analysing that piece of work. Now, the next time we do this, we want to take children, we want to bring children right through that process. We just ran out of time with the statutory guidelines that we were working with. But Helen and her students and her colleagues put together a fantastic submission, which was made to Cork City Council on behalf of those over 2,000 children in the city, which was wonderful. And that submission is available on the Cork Healthy Cities website if you want to look at it. So this is our logo. These are, this is part of our logo for Cork City, the two castles, the Queen's Old Castle and the King's Old Castle. And of course, because Martin O'Donoghue, who will be here again later, he's our chair, is such a water fan, we had to bring the River Lee into it, and we had to bring play onto the river. So I've talked a lot. I want you now for the next 5 minutes just to get to know each other. So for those of you online, Davidas is going to break you into some groups. And I just want you to say who you are, where you're coming from, and what your interest is maybe in terms of this webinar. And it's only for 5 or 6 minutes. Davidas, if you're okay to break people into groups, and here in the room, if you just chat to the people at your table and just say who you are and where you're coming from. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. That's wonderful. I hope there's a lovely buzz here in the room anyway, for those of you that are joining us online. Thanks for that. I'm going to hand you over now to Dr. Helen Lynch, and Helen's going to do a presentation on elemental fundamental. Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Thank you so much for the fantastic introduction earlier and setting the scene for today. And thanks particularly to Teresa Casey, who has put so much work into preparing for the event today, and equally for sharing her thoughts and ideas and her plans and her ways to help us engage around play in the first place. And one of the starting points that Teresa had hoped we could do at this stage was to, I suppose, reflect on the fact that we are all here from, or many of us are here from many different perspectives, and all engaging in play, but with different lenses, whether we work as practitioners or designers or parents of children with disabilities even, or adult play space users or advocates. So coming together is really around having a space and time to have conversations, and perhaps expanding on those perspectives and in our engagement together in ways that we probably haven't been able to do so easily over COVID. So a chance to gather and think and focus, but particularly around the fundamentals of play and the children's rights to play. So my name is Helen Lynch, as Denise said, and my background is occupational therapy. And Grace, I know you're speech therapy rather than occupational therapy, so just to say hi about that. But we have been working a lot over recent years to work in the realm of play, but also in particular around play and the right to play and inclusion. So we have actually got colleagues here from Sweden, Switzerland, Scotland, and our 10 play researchers that the EU and the IRC have funded to really focus and expand our knowledge on how to work in this realm and how to build on a more inclusive community for play. But our starting point within all of this is actually around the right to play, not around occupational therapy or rehab or practice in that regard, because we all are aware and committed to this starting point as the enshrined right to play from Article 31 of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, which states that every child has the right to rest and leisure, to engage in play and recreational activities appropriate to their age, and to participate freely in cultural life and the arts. And this is the right that underpins our perspectives and our commitment, all of us, no matter which perspective we bring or lens or which way we are working, that actually it's a human right, particularly for children. But equally, it's they are interconnected rights, so it's not just one right that we have to think about, so that every child has the right to play. And there's also Article 33, for example, in the rights of disabled children, and the interconnected interrelational Articles 7, 9 and 30 on the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So we need to consider the range of rights, of course, and not just one. And particularly when we're thinking of inclusive play and play for all children, we need to interconnect a lot of these sorts of ways of thinking. And in particular, what we know from the community of play researchers internationally, that it's been very difficult to actually implement this right, and for states to actually, as duty bearers, to actually put this into practice. So Teresa was very active in the international community in bringing together research and pushing for the United Nations to bring together this general comment on the right to play, to help us, to give us advice and support for how to implement the right to play. So it's called General Comment number 17. The image here is from the video that they produced from IPA, and it's a gorgeous video for any of you who mightn't have seen it before, on how to help children, how to remove the barriers that prevent children from playing. So really, it's all around this rights-based approach to play. Okay. I'm struggling here with I'm going to put that down there, sorry. Okay, so to start with then, I think this is part of this elemental fundamental piece, is thinking, well, what does play mean to us? And within the UN General Comment, if we take that even as a common framework with which to kind of inform ourselves or guide us, that children's right to play in this General Comment is any behavior, activity or process initiated, controlled and structured by children themselves. And it takes place whenever and wherever opportunities arise. So the yellow piece is highlighted because it really is this piece, I think, that I know from my own background, we never would have realized so much about how children, how the play piece is around their behavior as it naturally unfolds and develops. And it's not about how we control it or structure it necessarily. So what does that mean for us as practitioners and play workers? But the second part is that it takes place whenever and wherever opportunities arise. When you think of it, that's really more about space and time for play, which I think is really obvious after we've heard Denise present on all these play programs and opportunities and ways to work with play, that actually most of those were around providing that space and providing that time, not necessarily about structures and playgrounds and sports facilities, etc. So space and time is essential in that. So in order to be able to implement and work with play, there is this real need as adults, I think, to look through this looking glass that we talked about and sharpen our focus and vision of what play is and how to enhance it. And a really important starting point is asking children themselves. So in our work, when we've asked children, they say things like this: play is fun. And I think that's great. We probably know that makes them feel good. But when you dig into that, that's really what helps us understand what well-being is for children. It's a priority for them. We know from the Irish consultation from the Brighter Outcome, Better Futures from a few years ago, 54,000 children said play was one of their top priorities. Play happens anywhere and everywhere. It takes many forms, and that includes risky play, challenging play. It can be social or solitary, and outdoor play for children is often preferred to indoor play. It takes many forms, and I'm just stressing this. This is from the IPA video on the General Comment. It's not always social, not always with toys, not always with other children, not always pretend. And I'm stressing that because I think often as play workers, we prioritize maybe imaginative play, pretend play, cognitive play as ways of this advancing of learning. Whereas for children and in their worlds, they need this whole variety of play, and that needs to inform how we think about play spaces too. And of course, play is even more important during times of crisis, and we just have a lot of crises that we've experienced close to our homes and in our communities with COVID, and of course other crises that are happening in Eastern Europe now as well. But how children were then removed from play, how they needed more time for play, even more particularly, and yet it was an excluding time for them in difficult times. But for children especially, I think this is again something more about sharpening our lens, that play is often talked about as if it's a relief from serious learning for children, but for them it is serious learning. We need to understand, though, that doesn't mean we help them learn, that we necessarily, that it's a means through which they learn without being taught, actually, because it comes from that inner drive and that inner motivation, and the children can set the targets and the challenges themselves to a level that they are ready for. So if we take over too much, we don't allow that to naturally happen enough. Because this is what often happens as adults. We think, okay, let's just make them play harder and they'll learn better, or play harder and they'll get more fit, frolic harder and it's better for their well-being. But then you're taking over, you're hijacking. So we need to think about that a bit more carefully, because the child themselves, if you ask them, as we saw, that this might not necessarily be play. And this is the other part. And again, the general comments highlighted it, the bubble wrap generation, the protectionist approach that adults often take, that rather than seeing risk as healthy, we can often see it as being something that the child needs protection from. So too much of this surplus safety comes into play, and how do we actually engage with risk-rich environments rather than always thinking first about safety and protection. So what can we think about as adults, I think, as part of today and with inclusion and play, is what to avoid. If we can think of avoiding assumptions first, that play is frivolous, to avoid the assumption that we need to take over play and are hijacking it for it to be most beneficial. That's not necessarily true. It has a place, but that unless we provide also for this free play, we miss something really important. What we need to provide is actually time and space to play. So how do we do that? How do we promote or enable inclusive play in particular? In the general comment, part of the work was identifying infringements of play rights, and internationally they were able to identify areas of play deprivation, which children are more at risk of this deprivation, and which children therefore need more attention to realise their rights. So when we talk about play and inclusion, we're actually not just thinking about disability, but these other groups of children whom we know are also possibly at risk, depending on their culture and their context. Children from social disadvantage areas, children living in poverty, from Indigenous and minority communities, in some cases gender also, children in institutions, children in situations of conflict, as we've said. So I think this expansion of this perspective on inclusion is really important for the diversity that we need to consider. So what is inclusion? Another fundamental, if we ask people about inclusion, what does it mean to them? And this is the sort of thing that we know, or we know from people we talk to and children, about being listened to, about feeling welcome, feeling like you belong. So here's some examples of other ways in our community of how we experience this sense of inclusion. It could be just in the signage in our areas that we live in. So children's signs that say no children allowed, for example. Again, that could be for safety reasons, for health reasons, whatever, but that signage, what does it say to you? Here's a restaurant that says, doesn't say no children, it says no strollers, no high chairs, no booster chairs, children crying or a distraction to other diners, and they're not allowed. So would you go there if you were a family? Do you feel included? What's the messaging? And then a newer one I've not seen before, no adults allowed to this playground unless accompanied by children. So what's that telling you about this inclusive society where we know as adults, especially if you are older adults or maybe just adults whose children aren't nearby and who you want to experience that fun and joy you get when you're in playgrounds and listening to children having fun. It's good for our well-being as adults too, and yet if you're not allowed, be there. So there's lots of ways exclusion might be maybe a bit invisible. It's visible in the signage, obviously, but putting the messaging in this. So some solutions that we can think about, Denise has already shared lovely examples from Cork. I'm thinking, I suppose, more building on that idea of messaging, time and space for play, even just this road crossing to make it look more playful. Closing the roads, Denise talked about as well, having been tried in Cork, and it seems to be expanding across the UK as well as Ireland and in other communities internationally. Using spaces that are open and traffic free already, and having these pop-up play spaces. And one of the pieces of work we were doing during COVID also was for the Let's Play Ireland, was trying to advise on these play kits to be more inclusive also, with different size, different weights, different shapes, so that children who had maybe less physical ability or limited mobility, that they were able to engage in a different way with these sorts of materials. But there's a lovely example of signage here, I think. where you can see you're allowed to play. The children are welcome, adults welcome, as well as the cars as well, but just this messaging that's there. And a bit of playful messaging, free range children and adults, please drive slowly. And again, play is welcome here just by even, again, the presence of these footprints across walking areas. And a bit more formal built areas where at a bus stop, adding puzzles to walls along the street so that the play along the way piece is also factored in cities and in designing places where children are made to feel welcome. So from our European project, we have 10 students, like I was saying, from around the world looking at play with us. And we found even in our studies in Sweden, Switzerland, families telling us that playgrounds are often not designed with them in mind when we're looking at inclusion and families of children with disability. And children telling us that the spaces adults design for children to play in are not always fun. So when we move on to formal building places and playgrounds, how do we actually ensure we keep the play value in there and make them inclusive, but also fun? So these are, thanks to Teresa for sharing some of these, and I know I won't give as justice to them like Teresa would if she was here, but these were some of the pieces she wanted to share in general around universal design or thinking about inclusive design in playgrounds and play spaces. And this was a document she worked on with her colleague and our colleague too, Harry Harbottle, who has helped present on some of our play modules so far as well, and how to think about accessible and inclusive design. And in developing this material, they engage with over 100 children and families with disabilities to discuss what are priorities in these places. And I just wanted to stop and flag that this might seem an ordinary thing to do, but actually we find in all our research and in our European studies with our LUDI network project, very few countries have guidelines on inclusive design for playgrounds or universal design for playgrounds. So it's a real gap and a real need. So these are the kinds of things that Teresa was finding as well in the study, that accessible play spaces designed with they need to be designed with no barriers, with ease of access. And Alice is going to talk about this in more detail shortly. But the priority is a need for freedom to play, variety within the play space, social experiences, independence and access, sensory qualities and equipment and interaction, to think about all of these things. And she talked about this then, the layers of play and access and inclusion, that there is a lovely way to approach this, that you start with the bottom up, start at the base at the bottom and think about just that you can move through the space, and then what experiences you might be able to experience in there, how rich the play variety can be in there, etc. And that the best play spaces evolve. That you need to build in these sensory and ephemeral qualities, make a play space special for children, moving parts, bird song, rough bark, nature built in, and then bringing life to the place. So we can expect that spaces should be 100% welcome. Maybe not everything accessible, because then actually it's not fun for children. Should be able to do something in a playground and maybe not do everything, because otherwise you're missing out actually on the fun. There might be no challenge there if everything was easy to do. So it needs to be 100% welcome for sure. And most especially with a lot of children with disabilities and families, we need to talk about toileting and restrooms and the changing facilities. And we will hear from Crown shortly about how they have been embedding that into their plans as well. So to conclude, what we need to guide solutions for play, we think, is evidence-informed design for sure, especially when we're talking about playgrounds, that it's high in play value, that we're designing for all children, not just some, and it has to go beyond accessibility. It needs to be fun for users of varied sizes, ages and abilities, and intergenerational spaces that are welcome for all. So inclusion by design, we're going to hand over next to Alice to talk about, well, how do we design with these ideas of inclusion in mind as well? Thank you.
Oh, take the mask off and be able to breathe. So thanks, Helen and Denise, for that lovely introduction, which sets the scene nicely for this next part. So we're going to look at universal design and its application to play space design. So while universal design has applicability to both indoors and outdoor environments, just given the focus this morning, it's important to say in terms of spaces for play outdoors, that it includes natural built environments, for example, streets, designated playgrounds, and local landscape parks, which have been introduced by both Helen and Denise, as well as natural wild spaces such as forests, grasslands, and beaches. And it's also important to note that sometimes children seek out play in the most unfavorable environments also that are not necessarily designed for their play, such as building sites, etc. So just in terms of what are the common issues with built spaces. So in our work in Ireland, locally, nationally, as well as international colleagues, the common barriers is that there's nowhere to go, no way in, nothing to do, no challenge, no safe boundaries, and one size does not fit all. So it sounds very pessimistic, but unfortunately, these are the barriers that many children and their families experience. So how do we provide for all in our communities then? So as introduced by Helen, general comment number 17 really endorses universal design for public play provision. So what is universal design then? It's the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of age, size, ability, or indeed disability. It's a process that invites designers to go beyond compliance with access codes to create excellent people-centered design. I think it's important to note as well that we've Dr. Ger Craddock in the room from the Centre of Excellence in Universal Design. And today is a brief introduction to universal design. So it won't be all of the intricacies that are associated with universal design, but rather an introduction to inspire further discussion and dialogue. So there are other design solutions that are like universal design, such as inclusive design and design for all. But what sets universal design apart is that it's underpinned by 7 principles and 8 goals. So what is the aim of universal design in terms of place-based provision? So our colleagues, Teresa Casey and Harry Harbottle, in their guide, Free to Play, that Helen introduced earlier, identified that it's about providing the same or equivalent experiences and activities, but it has to be accepted that these may have to be provided in different ways for different people. On a play space, it's unlikely that all children will be able to use every feature in the same way, and they don't usually choose to either. But overall, all children should be able to access a good play experience in a welcoming environment. So just in terms of what universal design is not then as well, so it's not a synonym for compliance with access design standards. It goes beyond accessible design. It's not about designing for older people or for people with disabilities. Rather, it is good design for all. It's not about a one size fits all. It recognizes human diversity. And it doesn't aim at replacing design of products targeted at specific markets. And of course, universal design is consistent with a children's rights approach, as well as a human rights approach more broadly as well in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, as well as the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which has been incorporated into domestic law in various ways also. And as I mentioned earlier, the Committee on the Rights of the Child identified universal design as the way forward for public play provision. So within Ireland, then, universal design is embedded in Irish legislation, policies and standards in different ways. So we ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2018, and therefore committed to upholding the rights contained within that legislation. The Disability Act of 2005, our Ready Steady Play national play policy that was in place between 2004 and 2008. The more recent European standards, that's also an Irish standard, the ISEN 17210 2021, which offers specific guidance for playgrounds, which is a significant advancement. The community participation bill that's currently before our government that aims at exceeding building regulations and making Ireland more inclusive, among many, many more. And also the Centre of Excellence in Universal Design funded this research that Helen and I, along with colleagues, Linda Horgan and Dr. Claire Edwards were involved in 2018. And it was about looking at community parks and playgrounds, intergenerational participation through universal design. So that report is available online that you can access and use. In terms of Ireland, then I suppose we had some knowledge about how playground professionals understand and implement universal design, but we didn't necessarily have national data. So as part of my PhD, I recently conducted a survey of playground professionals to figure out what they understand by universal design, and indeed how they use and implement universal design in their practice in playgrounds. So there was 36 playground professionals from all provinces in the Republic of Ireland completed the survey. It sounds like a small number, but it's also important to recognise that it's a niche area of design also. And it's also, it can be challenging to access the right people also. In terms of how universal design is understood, you can see that most participants identify that it is very important. However, only 14% of them acknowledged that it was important for everyone. So universal design was considered important for persons with disabilities as opposed to good design for all. And 36% of the respondents reported that all projects require knowledge on universal design. So it's important to acknowledge that it is now embedded within our standards, the ISEN 17210, as well as our legislative documents. So in reality, all projects should require knowledge on universal design. So a key finding is that universal design is not used as a standard design strategy for every playground. And then in terms of the legislation, policy and guidance documents that they utilize in their practice. So only 19% of the respondents determined that legislation and policy documents, 19% determined that they were not applicable to their work. And 69% listed an array of guideline documents that support our work. And I suppose it's important to pick up on Helen's point that we don't necessarily have guidelines specific to Ireland. We do have guidelines from DESA from 2007, but we tend to look to our international colleagues for guidance. But it's also important to acknowledge that they are developed to varying degrees and are of varying quality then as well in terms of how universal design is embedded. So a key finding was that confusion existed between what is mandatory, that's legislation and policies, and what is voluntary or optional, so guidelines. So oftentimes the guidelines were listed interchangeably with legislation and policy when they have a different outcome. In terms of how it's prioritized among other factors, I think it's important to note here that we do acknowledge that there are numerous competing factors for anybody providing a playground. There's multiple factors and multiple layers that need to be taken into account. But 25% of respondents reported that they always prioritize universal design over cost, play, and play value. And 50% reported that they never prioritize universal design over safety. So of course, universal design is one of the factors that it works alongside all of the other factors, but that it's being prioritized over or under other factors is something that we need to consider going forward. So there are as we know, there are numerous competing priorities. However, safety takes precedence over other important priorities in many cases, suggesting that a standards first approach continues to dominate in playground design over providing for play for all and inclusion and creating welcoming environments. So in terms of implementing universal design, then the biggest barrier was a lack of knowledge on universal design, as well as a lack of good practice guides for embedding universal design. And what the participants determined most important to support their work was good practice guides for embedding universal design and more advice on how to provide for play and play value. So just in terms of not applying universal design in play spaces and designing environments that are not necessarily even accessible. Also, this was a quote from a 9-year-old girl that was a full-time wheelchair user in the report that we did for the Centre of Excellence in Universal Design. And she told us, I'm not able to go on stuff. I'm able to go on the swings with my mum because mum helps. I just look at them, and she's talking about her friends, and that's not good for me. It makes me feel odd. I think it's important to pause on that point. All children are fundamentally entitled to play. So designing and creating environments that doesn't provide for all results in cases such as this, where people don't feel welcome or included. So how do we overcome some of these barriers? And I don't have time to get into a whole host of solutions, but just in terms of some of the solutions we can think about, we need legislation for play and universal design. Yes, we have ratified the UNCRC, but we could look at our international colleagues in like Sweden or Scotland that have incorporated it into their legislation. We need policy for play and universal design. I did know that we did have a play policy, but this has been out of date since 2008. So we need more policy for this. And we need leadership for play. I think I'm preaching to the converted in the room here today. We're all here either as providers or advocates for children's play. So lots of leadership for play, and we all have a role to play, as we all know in the room and online as well. So we also need to commit to ongoing evaluation to understand the current provision and identify areas for improvement. We need to undertake ongoing consultation with our communities to understand their changing needs and priorities. We need to update and review relevant planning documents, strategies, and so on. And we need to keep up to date with the current research and innovation in terms of what's telling us is good practice. We also need user involvement. Of course, the success of any place-based design is dependent on honest and respectful co-design and co-creation with user experts alongside professional experts. Otherwise, design does and still continues to occur with limited contextual understanding of the lived experience. And we have lots of documents in Ireland to support our work on this. We have the National Framework for Children and Young People, named by Helen earlier, the Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures. We also have a national strategy on children and young people's participation in decision making. And as of 2021, we also have a national framework for children and young people's participation and decision making. So we can seek lots of support and guidance from these documents. Just in terms of 5 key take-home messages about universal design, there's many more outside of this, but that it's not a synonym for accessible design. It far exceeds accessible design. It benefits more than just older people and people with disabilities. It can be undertaken by any designer. It is not limited to specialists. However, we can seek support from specialists, especially from our Centre of Excellence in Universal Design. Sorry, Ger, if I'm going to be sending a whole load of work your way. And it's not just about a one-size-fits-all, and it needs to be tailored for play in play spaces. So I suppose in our work, what comes up a lot is that some of the principles of universal design, like simple and intuitive use, can sometimes be a little bit challenging when you're thinking about how do we provide for challenge in a play space. So it needs to be balanced with play priorities also. So thank you for listening today. For more information, you can contact myself or Helen, and we're more than happy to continue discussions and dialogue today as well as into the future. So feel free to reach out. I just have some references on screen, very academic. So I'm going to be handing over to our colleague from the Crown Centre, Colette Cahill. So they've recently developed their outside space for play and recreation, and Helen and I have worked alongside Colette colleagues as well as the Crown family members, their service users, to design the space for their needs. So thanks, Colette.
So as Alice said, we've been very fortunate in the Crown Centre to be able to access and gain the knowledge and insight from Helen and Alice in our endeavour to develop our fabulous play and inclusion space that we have in Crown. So I've been invited here today to just talk to you about our journey and how we've developed this. And I suppose from just even listening this morning and all the great work that Denise has talked about that's going on around the city, I think there's a lot of really good things happening. To give you all a little bit of an introduction as to who we are and what we're about in Crown. I suppose we are a charity providing support for families living with neurophysical disabilities. We came about, I suppose the concept came about, or the research started as far back as 2014 by a lady by the name of Kate Jarvie, who is part of the Lilly family, connected with Eli Lilly and that. And I suppose she had connected with a family who had a disability, And through that had done some background work. Her background is philanthropy. And she was looking for a project that was really worthwhile and wanted to get involved in. And I suppose out of that and out of some research work and background work, there was visits to Nottville in Switzerland, which is a famous rehabilitative hospital, and also to Riley Children's Hospital in Indiana University, to Boston, and other various centres. So out of that, Crown was born. So we're based out in classes in Oven, out near most people know by the John A. Wood Centre. If you're from any parts of the world, I still didn't know it, but we are, so we acquired a building, or we purchased a building out there, and it was redesigned with I suppose maybe it feeds into universal design in a different capacity, Alice, but in terms of, so all our corridors are designed in terms of so that two people who in wheelchairs can walk side by side or go side by side down the corridor. And the building is designed with all of those purposes in place. So I suppose this is again for us, and then we operate on a model of care, which is an Aspen 2-gen model of care, where we're very much, the family is the center spoke for us. So by that, what our model of care does is that we believe, and we've seen it work as it is that by supporting the family, you can and will support directly or indirectly the person, be it the child or the adult, with a disability. So we don't always have to just support the person with a disability, but actually if you can support the family structure around them, you're inadvertently or indirectly supporting the person with a disability. So our services are designed based on need around these 6 key theme areas. In these themes, we have a certain core services that we provide, as well as various services underneath each theme. So health and continence being one of them, our psychological well-being, again, in terms of our lots of different support, play therapy, counselling, psychological supports, our mobility, our education and career pathways, again, our independent living, and I suppose the community networks, mobility, psychological well-being. And in actual fact, in all these areas, there's an element of where the development of our outdoor play and recreation space feeds into them. I suppose it's particularly within community networks and under our mobility. We have we're a small team of 10. Cork is our CEO, who was hoping to be here today, but unfortunately he couldn't. And again, for some of you I know might be visiting tomorrow, you'll get to experience this firsthand. I'm possibly biased, but I do believe we have a very good centre, and we're growing day by day. We only really I started in September, the 1st September 2019. So we had our services ready to go. And in January or February, was it 2020, we visited Alice and Helen in UCC. And I suppose this is the innocence of 2 people who are very enthusiastic. To Alice and Helen, okay, we have this space, because Porrick and I, when, we're, I suppose you need to be, but we're a little bit like, let's just do this. We had the space outside, we have a beautiful site, and said, okay, we know that this is something that's coming for our families. We've heard it from them. We want to develop a playground. Okay, so arriving into Helen and Alice's office, great, we want this playground, we have this site now, will you help us? That's great, good, we want it done by June. And we thought, well, I certainly said, we can do this, And in very polite terms, they said to us, okay, yeah, that's no problem, Claire. I'm not sure we'll be able to meet that now. But anyway, a pandemic took over as well. So I suppose I suppose how this all came then, I suppose in terms of rationale and in terms of really looking at this, we took a step back. We took the advice of the experts in terms of really looking at this. And I suppose in terms of play and leisure, we know that they're important everyday destinations for family. We've heard this firsthand from our families. We know it. My background for years, I've over 25 years working in the area with disability, both from a clinical perspective, also from an educational and somewhat, and also from a psychological perspective. So I've met a lot, I've worked with a lot, I've learned a lot over the years. The pieces in terms of exclusion and sometimes just not being properly considered. And I suppose this is the important part, where members of our family, I suppose in Crown consistently communicated that they find themselves frequently excluded from outdoor play and leisure spaces. And I suppose that feeds back into the example that Alice gave of the 9-year-old girl, where they go to parks, they go to play, but they're not necessarily, they feel left out, or they can do one, maybe participate in one piece of equipment, but that's it. And I suppose I had my own, another example of that in terms of, this is real from a family who attends us in Crown, where my daughter is 11 and she wants to do everything, but I can't lift her, so we don't go to parks. There's nothing for her around us, and nowhere we can go. And I suppose from us in Crown, we believe it isn't right that Katie's daughter Aoife can't have the same experiences as her peers and siblings. We see it a lot of the time. You know, we have a very good drama group in Crown, and you know, we get to talk with the kids quite a lot. And I suppose hearing it from them, you know, play barns, play centres where people want to go, you know, we have parties. My kids had their birthday recently. You go to a play zone that's opened. How is that accessible for a child with a physical disability? It isn't. They might be able to do something on the ground, but they can't engage in the play. So immediately they're excluded. A child in the class, you want to invite all the class, but they can't go. Our space that we're developing, I suppose, or have developed in conjunction and on guidance from Alice and Helen, in terms of, we see this as a place where people can now come and have their parties. So it's their space. So you know, they're in their class. There are others that have the same, they're in the same school as their peers who don't have a physical disability, but now they have ownership. So they're coming to a play space where everyone can play together, but equally there's no one's feeling excluded. And I suppose that's what we're quite passionate about in Crown, and that's what we're quite proud of where we're going with it. So, as I said, the opportunity came about to provide a play and recreation space, and it was never going to be an exception to the rule, but of best practice for Crown Centre. And we pride ourselves on continuing to be best practice. Everything we do is researched, evidence-based, and we're about providing services maybe where there isn't service or there's a gap in service provision. So I suppose the Crown Centre, we teamed up, as we said, with Alice and Helen, and the project commenced. This is part of us in Crown and what we work with and some of our values, and we operate in terms of, when the world says can't, we say can. We are not patriots where we're breaking away for everything, but we certainly want to look above and beyond and what is actually possible to happen. So it all came about. Lots of catalogues, lots of looking, but I suppose we, you know, engaging the services of experts, because we're not, Pádraig and I certainly are not experts in this area. And I suppose, again, from designing for to designing with the Crown Centre family. And by that is, so it was real engagement from the word go with the families. They were the centre part. And by families, it was children. It's not just children, it was children. It was adults who had a disability, those with an acquired disability, those with a congenital disability. And also families. So partners, parents, that was all that was involved. I should say within Crown, we are predominantly for people with neurophysical disabilities. So in terms of, we work with people with childhood stroke, with spinal cord injuries, MS, muscular dystrophy. We have spina bifida, hydrocephalus, cerebral palsy, agrogryphosis, and other varying disabilities in that realm. Osteogenesis, that. So I suppose from design by inclusion and inclusion by design, that was our big thing going forward. How it came about. So the phase one was we had reaching a shared vision. Then we did our questionnaire. So Alice and Helen compiled, I suppose, questionnaires where we sent them out to children. So there was child-friendly questionnaires, obviously, that were appropriate for children, and then there was different ones for adults, and then for the parents or carers. We facilitated focus group discussions whereby we had, unfortunately, we wanted to do it in person, but we didn't have that opportunity because of COVID. But I suppose looking at it on the positive rather than the negative of that, you know, we were able to facilitate it online. We had participants who joined in online, and we were able to get their input. And it was so amazing, just the kids' involvement, I think, in that, wasn't it? I mean, they really can teach us something amazing. You know, we all have great ideas and thoughts as adults, and as professionals, we think we know what's right. but nothing like a child to bring you right back down to actually, this is what you really need to do. And I think I certainly learned that on the calls with them. And I suppose coming back to Helen's picture that she put up in terms of the child in the bubble wrap, I'm probably a little bit like that as a parent in times. I tend to, be the bubble wrap parent. Oh God, mind don't fall off that, you'll hurt yourself or something like that. But actually kids need risky play, and more so kids with a disability need risky play. And it's a challenge that we work with in Crown, because families, and understandably, you want to protect your child, but maybe there's that little bit extra layer of protection if your child has a physical disability. But they need risky play. Why shouldn't they? So I suppose that the focus group, we had, we learned a lot from that. And I think parents learned from it as well, because we got their insight on a different level to see where they were coming from, and then obviously where the child was coming from. We had a user-friendly report for the design team. So we did the site plan with lots of reviews and revisions. Would that be fair? And I suppose bringing it back to the group as well. Then a final plan sign off and ongoing site developments. And I can share some of that with you in a second. So this is what I hope you can see this, and hopefully those of you on Zoom and joining in online can see it. So this is where we came up with in terms of design. I think there's a video. This is the video. I'm just going to play this now. This, I suppose, in some case, this turned out to be, it's what started off in, if you can see this little section here. This is the section we started off thinking, okay, we're going to put a playground in here. Okay, this side. We very quickly, after all our meetings and consultations and meeting with children and talking with Alice and Helen. So what started off with a small project has ended up into the full length of the site at the back of the Crown Centre, and has turned into a €500,000 project. So the video I'm playing is about the design of the area. It's, I suppose, taken from some of our fundraising videos, so you can ignore the latter part of that. So I suppose with this area, this will actually be covered in now, and there's a space to having video and outdoor cinema. We have an outdoor barbecue and pizza oven, which I wasn't at all passionate about, was I? Became Colette's desire as well. Yeah, we have outdoor water and sand play. This design, you can't see it here, but the ramp in here. So some of this is what we presented back to the families and to the children and to all those that were involved in the research and got their input into it. And out of that, some tweaks and changes were made as well. So I might just speed this along a little bit for you, because I can come back to it because there's another piece in this. Okay. That's the piece. Yeah, actually, sorry, apologies, but you're going to have to endure another video now. I should say within this, one of the big things that came out of this was, at playgrounds not being able to reach the highest point. And it's something, I suppose, that we gave a lot of thought and consideration to in terms of being able, so we have been able to reach the highest point. So with the help of a group of volunteers and a very, very experienced and skilled craftsmanship, we are currently 3/4 way there to finishing what we think, but I suppose open to correction, is the first fully accessible pirate ship, whereby that anybody with any disability, with a physical disability, you can get to the highest point. So everybody can get to the highest point within this. It's a big, it's been built from complete from scratch with really experienced craftsmen. And I suppose it's fully accessible, and it has got all the different bits that people have asked for in it from the research we've done. And it also brings about challenge. So I suppose if you go back to our model of care, where we have different areas we work in, this is play, but it's also play with activity in it, because with our pirate ship, you'll be able to access your OT in terms of mobility, movement, exercise programs, and also just fun and challenge along the way. This is the video I was talking about, so I'm going to play this. It's a bit.
Through our collaboration with University College Cork, we found that playgrounds with equipment for children with disabilities are limited or poorly designed. Crown is building Ireland's first fully accessible playground and leisure area for families with disabilities. It will be big and bold, somewhere to experience risky play, a space for the whole family to enjoy. The layout includes a diverse range of play experiences, each designed with accessibility and inclusivity in mind. The dining area with pizza oven and barbecue will be an attractive destination for birthday parties and provides fun opportunities to socialise and learn cooking skills. The jewel in the crown is our swashbuckling pirate ship. Scaling heights is exciting for any child, so our fully wheelchair accessible centrepiece will have little pirates' imaginations running wild. Your donation will make this happen. We are raising €500,000 to bring this vision of fully inclusive play to life. Visit www.crowncentre.ie to find out more.
I suppose what I should say within that is, with the play and recreation space, it's not just for kids; it's also for adults. But within the video there, obviously with the animation, you're limited to what you can do in animation. So some of the pieces, when I saw it, I'm like, it's bigger. But but you might have noticed the big yellow wheelchair accessible swing in the middle of it. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine because talk about making it look different from the word go, a yellow swing. Where what we have done, as you'll possibly be able to see from here, is we with the suppliers of our thing, we asked that it wouldn't be different colour, that it would be the same as the other swings within the playground. And so thankfully they were able to facilitate that. So our the wheelchair accessible swing is the same colour as the other swings. So it doesn't stand out. So it's not immediately different. Obviously for certain reasons there has to be fencing, but we looked at how we can maybe make that more discreet as well. Because safety, as Alice talked about, is also a key priority in this. So this is some pictures of what's happening here in Crown. And for those of you, I think there is some of you coming to visit tomorrow, you'll get to see it firsthand. It has moved on a bit, and unfortunately I was looking for the most up-to-date picture, but like I'm sure a lot of people here, we're impacted by COVID and people being out sick, so I couldn't access that picture. But this has moved on quite a bit, and what started out as a small ramp, we now have quite a lengthy ramp with rest periods on it. So it's designed, so there's rest periods on it, and all of that will have some equipment along the way so kids can interact and play, as well as underneath here the challenge and that. So we really make it work for the space. These are some of the quotes from people, and you can access some of these, on 96 FM. I'm very excited about the new playground because it's a pizza oven and pirate ship and lots of space to wheel around. Looking forward to playing with my friends, and that again, it really resonates and it feeds back into Alice's point of when, in the 9-year-old, but with some of our kids, particularly, is that I can actually be able to play with my friends. And one of the kids is, said at the things like, it'll be my space. So the friends can come. So somewhere where it can be mine, I can bring them to where I know it's my place to play. Again, being asked to give their input was huge. People reported, some of the adults reported that they'd never been consulted on their design and thoughts before. And also in terms of, they might be consulted. We did have one who was consulted on the playground, but the actual consideration of the ground that they can work on, because chairs can't get over that chip, that wood chip. Chairs sink in that. They just can't do it. I mean, it looks good, you can talk about it, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. If any of you have ever taken anyone to a space where there's wood chip, you'll know that doesn't work. Yeah. Okay. And then I suppose these are just some of the facts in that was play being a fundamental to a child's physical, social and emotional well-being. So the social skills, independence, the emotional resilience, important for brain development, as well as the imagination, development of motor skills and the balance and spatial awareness. They're all the actual developments that can happen, the positives, as well as fun and having an enjoyment and making real friendships. And so this is, again, what we are doing in terms of the School of Occupational Therapy and Science with Alice and Helen. We have developed a space, and again, talking about how we got here in terms of their design represents their wishes, not ours. So the play space that we have is about what they wanted, not what we thought they needed. Okay. This might be just something worth sharing with you based on the research we found. I suppose that 50% of the families we asked reported uneven or unsuitable surfaces made it difficult to play, feeling left out and not being able to keep up with peers or siblings, not being able to access the highest point of play equipment, limited choices of equipment, site furnishings, shelters and benches. So when we're creating a space, you know, that there's shelters, that there's, because some people light and being able to protect themselves from the light or the sun. They always need for an adult to get you on or off equipment. You know, one can be able to get away from that independence, development of independence. I can do it myself. Limited opportunities for the independence. Accessible equipment separate from the main play area. Often they say in playgrounds, when they go to playgrounds, that the equipment is, you know, to the one side, so it's almost separated. The appearance of it, which comes back into the yellow swing. And the big one, which which needs to be considered at all times when creating play spaces, is access to bathroom facilities. You know, having a bathroom there, it needs to be wheelchair accessible, but it also needs to be not like, you know, the dirty floors. You need to have proper changing benches. A baby's changing table is not appropriate for a 9-year-old who may need to lie on a bench for some of their toileting needs. And it's a really important thing to consider. Okay, I think we're more or less there then. Yeah, I'm aware I'm going very over time because I can see Deirdre just jumping on the chair there. But I did warn her that I have the ability to talk a lot. So this is how we got here. We okay, I've possibly covered some of this. The wide entrances. So considering all these, the wide entrances, the play, the physical, the intergenerational play. So adult fitness as well in the area, the sheltered areas, the relaxation area, which is very important for both family and for children. You don't need me to tell you, I'm talking to a room of people who know this better than me about play as being a human right. And then that's just us in a nutshell in summary. Thank you very much.
That was great. Thanks a million, Colette. Wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing here now, and I'm just going to, yeah, great. We can see here. So put your cameras on. We'd love to see you all there, so that we're not forgetting about you. Hi, Teresa. Lovely to see you. Hi, everybody. So we're just going to break into groups again. Devidas is going to break you guys online into a group. We're just going to get you to talk about the presentation so far, and likewise here in the room at the tables. You know, maybe something that might have stuck out for you, any questions you might have, and we're going to pose those questions to the speakers here this morning. So what I'm going to suggest for the people online is you're going to be in groups, and when you come back from your groups, will you just pose those questions in the chat room, and we'll be looking at the chat here online. So don't anybody send me a private message that's inappropriate, because it's on the screen here. So pose your questions in the chat function when you come back from your group. So anything you might like to comment on, any questions you might have for the speakers, or any comments you want to make, and likewise in the room here for the next 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Welcome back. Sorry, I very quickly pulled you out of your groups there. It's great. I've ultimate control with you online. I don't have as much control here in the room, just to let you know. So thank you for coming back. It's lovely to see familiar faces, and it's lovely to see some of our partners from around the country as well, which I forgot to mention from the URBACT project here as well, which is wonderful. Please don't be shy. Post your questions in the chat box or your comments. I'm happy to facilitate the posing of any questions to any of the speakers here this morning. So is there anyone in the room who'd like to put a question or make a comment? There's a microphone going around there. Martha has one in her hand. So speak into the mic so the people online can hear. Great, we've someone with their hand up here. And likewise online, please post your questions. We're looking at them here. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Now you might introduce yourself if that's okay, and then just
Sure, Karen McCarthy, and I'm just representing the question for the group. We were discussing the balance between safety and risky play, and I was just wondering what has worked well to negotiate that balance and to bring kind of a knowledge of risky play to like safety and legal policies.
fantastic. Helen, would you like to take that? The balance between Martha's dancing around here just in case you can't see her online.
I think there's been a lot of work in the UK on this, and risk rich and how to build that into your designs in your playgrounds in particular, risk rich environments, how to plan for risky play rather than prevention of risk. How to do the balance, I think, is a really good question, especially following on from Colette's presentation, where a lot of the children and the families, when we were consulting with the Crown service users, their experience of risk is just so intensified, I think, when you've got children who have been born with a physical disability and might have gone through a lot of medical procedures and surgical procedures, where you're trying to keep them safe from a lot of jarring movements, or even to do wheelchair skills training, for example. It's been a big development, hasn't it? And trying to let go some of that protection piece and have the children get experiences of building up their independent skills just in movement, let alone in play. So I think it's a huge area, especially for children with physical disabilities, to expand this positive approach toward risk, and rather than always looking at it as a protectionist. I don't know, does that answer? But
great. And it is true, you know, we're risk averse. I know as a parent, you know, surrounded by people, we're all risk averse, and we're transferring that fear onto our children, and we're limiting their capacity to explore the world. So it's to really challenge ourselves, you know, to let children take the risks and to expand, because there is maps. I know Tim Gills has presented on this, how a child's world is shrinking more and more closer to their home. So and that's for all children across the board. There's a question here online from Fingal County Council. What kind of play would you recommend for adults and seniors that's ideally low cost? Any thoughts on that?
Just to pick up from the risk question as well before we move on, there's tools in the UK risk benefit approach, and it's also how we build it into our policies as well within our own local areas in terms of what's acceptable, in terms of, you know, how we go about building in risk, but also having the documentation to support our work in the area. In terms of providing play for older adults, I don't have the answer to that. I think we need to ask the older adults themselves what's important to them and how to provide that for them in our communities. People might have some ideas in the room as well, so please feel free to share too.
Cathal, you wanted to say something on that, did you? Great, thank you. Just take a mic 1 sec now, because the online will have to hear you. Thanks.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, just on that, Cathal Garrity, I'm with Cork ETB, previously with Cork Sports Partnership. If you go to the Go for Life website, they have tons and loads of resources for older adults, and they've been doing this for the last 10, 20 years. So they have loads of great ideas. Also the Cork Sports Partnership, if you go onto their website, just to plug them, they do have resources for older adults, and they also have the Let's Play older adult senior book that Denise talked about earlier. So that's just my 2 cents, sorry.
Yeah,
And for the
thanks,
people online, you can do that now online. You can go to that website. But for the people here in the room, we have a play box here from the play pack for older adults if you want to have a look at it during the tea break. So thanks for that. Somebody else have a question in the room? Gary.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Gary Jones. I'm a musician, designer, and artist. I make musical playground equipment. And but I specifically wanted to ask about the risk. How is that recognised by the insurance world? You know, like there's sort of practical limitations that are placed by executives who have nothing to do with risk at all. But
yeah, I think it continues to be one of our biggest barriers to place-based design and development is the insurance structures in Ireland. And I think we, as a nation, need to lobby together to figure out how we can make this work. Because at the moment, insurance is taking precedence over everything else, and it's costing like insane amounts of money that could be spent otherwise. So I think as a nation, we really need to relook at the insurance structures in Ireland for that. Because yeah, it is taking over and it's limiting what we can do. Yeah, Colette might be able to say something for Crown, I think.
One's enough for me now. Afraid to give me a mic, I'll keep talking. I suppose from Crown's perspective, this was certainly something that was a big challenge for us and in developing this and how we could get people to get access to it. So after lots of consultation with our insurance people and that, I suppose how it's ended up, obviously in terms of the equipment and that, it all needs to be signed off by ROSPA. And so obviously with the development of the ship that's been built, and as I said, it's been voluntarily built but by craft people, but again to the spec with the oversight obviously of people who are in the field and understand what they're doing. So it's built to the point of where it can pass or will pass, hopefully. And we know it will at this point, ROSPA inspection. And I suppose in terms of other insurance, because insurance is phenomenally expensive and it's almost designed to not let us develop play spaces. How we've come around that, I suppose, is that for anyone to access Crown play and recreation space, you have to come through Crown itself. So we have to be aware of who's on site at all times. So it can't just be open to the general public to rock up, which is a limitation, but that's the only way.
And if I could just add to that, then of course, when it's a public play space, we know from a lot of these wheelchair swings, they need to be locked and they need to be really protected from or removed in that way from children just running through the space and the risk of having accidents. So that means straight off, you have a fence, you have a lock, you have to have someone to unlock it. You usually end up with a more exclusion replaced than inclusion, and the social experience is clearly missing then, because the swing is behind this fence and it's just the experience of swinging, which of course can be fun enough, but if it's about social inclusion and social play together, where's the social element in that? It really needs a lot more thinking about.
And there's a lovely comment here from Claire about the discussion in their group and the need for opportunistic play and trying to allow children to be as opportunistic and leading the play themselves. And that's something I know Cathal has often said it as a qualified PE teacher, and I witnessed it as well in Udine. We really learned with the Urbact experience about the importance of not directing children's play. We have a tendency to do that as adults and interfere nearly with their play. When we were in Udine, it was incredible. I wish I had filmed it. The play bus pulled up to a plaza on a Saturday morning, which to me was full of adults drinking coffee, Italians on a beautiful sunny morning. And when the play bus pulled up with the equipment, literally the children came running from every corner of the city. It was like the ice cream van here in Ireland, maybe. Children came from everywhere. and they took the equipment and they owned the equipment, and we actually just got involved and played. We didn't try to tell them what to do. And the people who were operating the play bus said that that was their role, to step back and only to step in if invited by the child, or if the child was struggling in some way to use something. So we really learned about that. And I think that's important when we're trying to put structured things in place, that we step back as adults and allow children to own that space. Just a final question here from Jeanette in Fingal. Any good ideas on intergenerational play with more and more grandparents minding grandchildren while parents have to go to work? Has anyone got any nice ideas around that, or suggestions around intergenerational play? Helen, great.
I know a colleague we met through the Bernard Van Leer Foundation, Margaret Kernan's been involved a lot with the Together Old and Young project. I think that's also European, but there's a website, there's lovely materials, and as far as I'm aware of resources, training that they do around how to enhance this old and young togetherness.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'd love to do something like that with Age Friendly here in Cork. So if anyone has any suggestions for something, we'd be delighted to move forward with it.
I might
Martha.
just come in there. Our libraries in Cork City, along with the Health Action Zone worker on the north side, recently ran a board game making workshop in the library, where they encourage grandparents to bring their kids along, and they worked with a craft artist to design a board game, and apparently it was an absolutely huge success. So they're going to look for funding to run a series of workshops. So I think maybe kind of a distinct project-based work with grandparents and kids to kind of open up that narrative of play between grandparents and kids, because it depends on the grandparents now, obviously, but it's maybe a different kind of play that they need to focus on. It's maybe less around climbing trees and more about, you know, something quite physical, craft-based, and imagination-based. So we can definitely maybe look at that and report back as well.
Fantastic. That sounds brilliant. Okay, so we're nearly at 11:15. We're going to take a 15-minute break. I'm going to be really strict with the people here in the room, I promise. I'm going to invest in a bell and get everybody back. So we're going to come back for 11:30. So everybody online, you can go and take a break for yourself and come back, because we have some really exciting stuff after the break. Okay, we'll see you soon. Oh, and there's coffee, sorry. There's tea and coffee in the room here, so please go and get some. Okay, will we come back? Great stuff. I think the coffee is warming us all up here. We're very conscious of ventilation in this room, but we're all frozen as well. But I think it's keeping us awake, which is always a good thing for these events. So welcome back. I'm now delighted to allow you to view the inaugural viewing of this video that was developed, funded by the Active Cork City Fund, administered by Cork Sports Partnership. And this video is about celebrating intergenerational play, but also play in its broadest sense. And you'll see some of the stars, some online. Grace Walsh will be on it, and Helen Lynch will be on this video. And you'll also see that input from the couple who received the play pack and were involved in the sing-along and the concert that eventually took place in the Aula Maxima at the end of restrictions last October. So I'm going to ask David S. to play it, and Martin O'Donoghue, who's our chair, was also involved in the development of this. So we'll play it there. Roll it there, Roisin.
Cork is a city embracing play. With our European partners and through the Playful Paradigm Project, we are on a mission to encourage, provide access and stimulate debate on the right of play for all ages and abilities. Join us as we explore some of the projects that we are currently engaged in with the young and young at heart in Cork City.
So what we have here is a new library toy collection, and that supports the objectives of Let's Play Cork, and it provides access to play for people of all ages, young and old. The collection caters for children and adults, and the items range from board games and jigsaws to resources that support the development of motor skills and coordination, and encourage active play as well as more quiet play that you might normally associate with a library setting. The collection also aligns with sustainable development goals of responsible consumption. Members can borrow rather than buy toys, so that idea of trying something out, and if it's something that you actually are going to use, you can buy it, but you can return it if it's a kind of a shorter use kind of idea. There's a kind of an embedded link between play and story. Which means that because we are kind of the keepers of stories for the city, it's a natural place to fit play in as well.
Roisin has dyspraxia, so we do a lot of our occupational therapy in her speech and language, but we do it all through play, so it's not a session, so we try to incorporate it. So playing to us is crucial, it pushes Roisin on. See. Your horse. I think a lot of kids are going away from actual play and imagination play, it's computer games, tablets and so forth. Don't get me wrong, she still loves all those things, but imagination play it's great that she still does it.
So play is really the bread and butter of the work that we do here. So we work with families from pregnancy up to children turn 4. So we've got some lovely groups that we run here in Let's Grow Together. So baby massage, Elklin Let's Talk with Your Baby, Peep Learning Together, parent and toddler groups, where we can come together in this space. Babies and young toddlers can meet their own age peers and engage in playful interactions and activities. And there's also an opportunity for parents and caregivers to engage in playful interactions with each other and to meet and socialise and connect. I suppose we wonder with parents about what kind of play their child is interested in. Maybe there's some types of play that they're avoiding or they're not quite comfortable in. So we want to figure out, what's playful for their little one and find a way in to support that interaction and fun, and ultimately to support optimal, healthy development. So play is such an incredible tool. When we play and when we engage and interact in play with young children, we're literally building babies' brains. That's how powerful play is. We need to remind ourselves that there's no right or wrong way to play, and that children will show us their interests and their preferences.
Sorry, remove our stuff. In French class, I think.
What's your name?
Oh no, it wasn't there 7 years ago.
I don't mind, the pressure's off now.
Do you miss me tonight? Are you sorry we drifted apart? Does your memory strain to that bright summer's day? It was challenging, but it was exciting, And I think first I noticed about it was that you were so accepted, When I forget. I think Memories was the first song I sang. That's a song, if I'm stuck, I come up with. And I tried that because the voice was quivering and all this, but
You did it, yeah.
You felt like you could work away on it, and they all sang in their turns, and it was really enjoyable. It was great, for the lockdown. There's the singing, but there's the chat and the banter and slagging and as they say, if you're never too old to play if you want to play, and that's what we were doing.
And singing is playing because it's fun. You enjoy it.
Yeah, so I suppose the main thing is understanding how play impacts on children, or the place of play in childhood, and it's the means through which children really learn about the world. And it's not this official academic learning, it's natural ways of learning through exploring, through testing out things, through learning how to negotiate with each other, trial and error kind of things, through risky play, all of these things that really build resilience. And really build a sense of well-being in childhood. So when you talk about the impact of play deprivation, it's that these things are missing and are less
experienced by children. Across the 9 projects, we're looking at play around place, about spatial play, you know, in public environments and playgrounds, virtual play also, and the value of that. And I think especially during COVID, we've seen that with children. It's been a really important part of their lives, as opposed to oftentimes it's put out there as very negative for their health and well-being, and yet that's how they've connected during COVID. Play for policy as well, how to enact policy down to the front line and to, you know, to carry out like playful cities, and how do you go from the decision making and the grants and the policy and design of things, of programs, to actually implementing them. What are the blocks and supporters for that? We've recently been awarded a grant for 4 years for 2.2 million from the EU to explore play and play deprivation. Myself and Professor Jeannie Jackson are coordinators for the grant, and there are 3 other universities across Europe involved as well.
Lovely. Thanks for that. That's a lovely video. That was we're getting very sharp with our marketing and our putting our logos and everything. But that's a video that we're really delighted to have developed, and we'll be making that available on the Let's Play Cork website after this morning. So thanks for that, Martin and JJ, who put that together for us. I'm thrilled now to introduce you to 2 people who are going to speak now, who are going to talk about their experience and maybe what they think is important in terms of play and inclusion. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for coming along, and we'd be delighted to hear from you. I'm going to pull this chair up so that you can reach the mic as well.
Sometimes it's a bit shy, but I want to show you, because Emil often joins my meetings at home. So he's very used to Zoom, aren't you? And you sometimes chair my meetings, which is very helpful. So we're up there. Can you see? Can you see that's us? And you see lots of other people? Okay, so yeah, that's right. So we're going to talk about what? We're going to talk about playing and play areas and what it means to us. Isn't that right? It's what it means to us as a family, because we only arrived. What's this city called? You've forgotten?
We have to shut off our own.
No, we shut the unmute off afterwards. That'll be okay. So there'll be somebody else next after us, but right now it's us. So we moved to Cork about a year ago. And one of the things that has been most important for us since we moved to Cork is how inclusive play has been actually really important in terms of us settling into the city, finding friends, and essentially supporting this young man especially in meeting new people, in having a life outside his house and outside his school. Yes, because very often, if you're disabled, you're traveling a long way to your school. You might have special, not just special physical needs, but special cognitive and special emotional needs. That's right, because when we talk at school, it goes to a school where people are deaf and they sign. That's right, isn't it? That's right. And then also, as you can see, sometimes people get very excited about things and get very emotionally overwrought. This can be extremely isolating, isn't that right? I know it's okay, don't worry, people are looking, they're looking at us. And they think we're doing very well, isn't that right?
Yeah.
And we can switch the mute on afterwards, can't we? That's right. So this is by way of saying that there may be a disabled person, child or adult, but there is also a family. And the family, I speak from experience, but I know this is not just us, your family can be very isolated, can be very lonely, it can be massively stressed, alarmingly tired, and often extremely focused. And there's one person in the family. And your whole life can revolve around this. It can also revolve around the other thing you're doing at the moment, which is massive form filling and things like that. So just landing in Cork and discovering that down at the bottom of the street we were on, there was a community garden. And we love gardening, don't we?
Yeah.
We do. We do super gardening. So there was a community and there was a play activity that everybody could join in. And then discovering that the Irish Wheelchair Association, Cork Sports Partnership, and others had brought together a club particularly focused on children with physical disabilities. It's Cork, it is naturally called the Rebel Wheelers, but it creates such opportunities for all of us. And then finding that there were places like the Crown Centre. And I tell you, I was watching your video and I was close to tears because that is the dream place or play park. Why is it the dream play park? It's not just that it's got like stuff that you can get on with a wheelchair or by holding onto a handle if you walk with difficulty or if you have a frame, but it's got places where parents can sit down. It's got places where parents can not just sit down, but sit discreetly. Because one of the most important things, yes, what is it? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We will. I was talking about the Crown Centre.
Yeah.
You like the Crown Centre?
Yeah.
Crown Centre is brilliant, isn't it? She's from Crown Centre. Can you see she was waving at you? You can put your glasses on, you'll be able to see better. Okay. It's got danger in it. You can actually go up high. Do you know what? If you spend an awful lot of your life as a disabled person on the ground with people telling you to be careful, the sheer thrill of going up high. And if anybody's able to get to Ballincollig Park, well, you know it already. Ballincollig Park is a tower. And what's at the top of the tower? You don't know what. You know the slide. Yep. And it's very high up. And I could stand there because it is so perfectly enclosed and safe that for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, the animal stays up there. I know he is getting a thrill of being up high and looking around. And I am getting the sheer thrill that nothing can happen to this boy. He is so safe. And yet it is so dangerous in its own way. And I think this to me is the kind of the matrix, my dream matrix for a family like ours, or for the disabled children in our family and across all of the families that we work with, we play with around the Crown Centre. I actually recognize some of the people. Yeah. It is a community. So I would stress when I went out and I asked lots of the parents beforehand. I said, you know, what do you think? And so they mentioned things that have come up. We hate bark mulch. And we have a special society that is just dedicated to the sheer hatred of that thing. Why? Because you trip over it, your wheels get stuck in it. Yep. But there are a whole load of other nice surfaces that have similar properties. But it's not just about that. It's not just about ramps, although all of those are important. It's about, firstly, is it a play area that is genuinely inclusive? It doesn't have a huge sign saying kids who are different from all the other kids and can't do normal things like normal kids can do, stay here. It's really small. The equipment probably has, sorry, our favorite game after getting rid of bark mulch is hunt. No, yes. I will. I'll put on my new mask.
Not your old mask.
No, okay, I'll do that. Can I keep talking?
No. Can I keep talking, please?
Will you tell them about the play areas that you like?
You can tell us, please.
Oh, okay, I'll keep talking. So another favorite game of ours is hunt the key that lets you get into the disabled swing. This is a major game that people play. It can take an awful long time. By the time you found it, it's probably time to get home, and it's not much fun for the disabled child. So it's not just about having a few facilities. It's not about having a few facilities locked away. It's about that super inclusion. It's about the fact that when you're a disabled child will very often be coming to play area with people. Now, it's important for us that the child actually gets the fun with the other children. I mean, like, how exciting is it to have your parents when around? So we see what people are doing, but see it from a distance. We need the things that people came up with. Where are the picnic benches? Where are the toilets? How accessible is the actual area? Because, hello. How accessible is the actual area? Because we need to be able to get to the place. Often with extremely large vehicles. We travel in a small vehicle. Great many of our friends essentially travel in buses, and it's extremely important that they can. That's perfect. So will we hold that? Will you hold that for me? Thank you. That's very good. The next thing is, don't forget that a play area is also known as a physiotherapy place, where you don't have to have a big sign saying it's a physiotherapy place. So it is a real opportunity to have surfaces, ways of holding, different ways of gripping things. It's a microphone, and so all the people over there can hear us. Take a look at the screen for a moment and you see all the people. It's a place also where you can stimulate somebody, because there will be things for them to do, making sounds with music areas, different sensory areas are also extremely important. Some of us need to keep our eyes sheltered because of photophobia. The idea, the play area that is out in the wide open, like something from the prairies in a cowboy movie, not always ideal. Could we have a tree? Could we have a sheltered area? Could we have a place where we can leave the play area and actually move into something that is, maybe it's a field, maybe it's a cafe, maybe it's a street?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah.
Cafes especially. Cafes especially. Somebody loves a cafe. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that a good idea? I think the thing that kind of my thought, as I say, that I would leave people with is just to think of the different layers for a family like ours. So there is an actual layer of physical facility. The physical facility that is genuinely inclusive, as I say, not the yellow swings. And certainly not the yellow swings way over there and the place with the sign leading up to it. It's got to be a place where there is a kind of a community. Now, you cannot design a play area and design a community with it, but there are things that can be done in terms of notice boards and in terms of how we use accessibility through things like the clubs that we have, or the gardening group that we are part of, so that play areas themselves become mentioned and recognized in wider communities, not just inside disabled people's communities or the families of disabled peoples, but you know, it's got to be the same for everybody in that sense. And then finally, I would say the play, people don't just play in play areas, but there is an awful lot that can be done by those people who are used to designing play facilities in terms of taking a look just at supporting city planners, city parks departments, etc., in terms of how are actual streets working for disabled people, and how are the parks and the gardens and the gardening communities also supporting this. Because to some extent, the more one can provide those facilities in a natural way, the less emphasis we would have to put on the kind of the more capital intensive, more maintenance intensive play facilities. So we get that kind of portfolio as families with disabled children, so that our life is, and my friend's life, are just like everybody else's life. And that is what really makes a difference to us. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk.
Who's that?
Have you said thank you to these people?
Thank you for that. It's so important to hear in terms of their experience. And I know there's comments coming through, and one of the site visits this afternoon is to what we'll hope will become a play street, taking the idea of play into the broader context and accessibility into the broader context of the city and beyond just the playgrounds. So one of the groups here today will get to maybe give us some advice about how the play street can be as inclusive as possible. So we're now going to move on to universal design, and Brian Boyle is going to join us and take the lead on this. I'm just going to share my screen now again. Lots of slides that we hope to share with you on us. Yeah. After this event, and there will be a recording of this event made available to everyone who registered as well. So I'm just going to put this on.
I need to start by saying I can't claim any credit for this at all. This is entirely designed by Teresa Casey, who I want to really thank, and to Alice and to Denise and to Helen. And just to say that I'm a very poor replacement for Teresa Casey, for anybody who knows her. But I do want to just acknowledge I guess just the work that she had done in particular in terms of kind of bringing this all together, and particularly this kind of part of the morning, which is really about, I think, trying to give everybody a chance to maybe just get involved in that idea of design and imagining and enjoying that fun of what imagining a perfect, a great, like a wonderful kind of play space actually kind of looks like. And I think to some extent being able to kind of get that sense that we can all play a part in actually imagining and making a reality of what those inclusive play spaces that we've heard about all morning actually kind of might look like. So an activity has been designed that will actually give you a chance both this morning and again a little bit later this afternoon to actually kind of go and see some spaces and actually start to kind of try and imagine what those spaces might look like as they're transformed into play spaces that are inclusive. So this morning we're going to just do a quick kind of design brief activity. Everybody should have a tablecloth in front of them. And I'm kind of thinking that this morning you may be actually thinking, okay, what am I doing at a tablecloth that's got lots of writing and stuff like that on it? So it all becomes clear now over the next kind of few minutes. So I'm just going to introduce this exercise, and again the exercise for this afternoon, by talking just a little bit about actually how do we design. All right, because I think we've all got sort of preconceptions in terms of how design happens, and a lot of the time what happens is we kind of move immediately to that end stage of the design where we're starting to think about what the equipment looks like, you know, just jumping on kind of what Colette was kind of saying this morning, you know, whether or not the slide is yellow or the swing is yellow or blue or what the color kind of might be and what it actually is. But sometimes I think, in particular, going back to what Helen was talking about this morning, taking a step back and actually thinking, okay, well, what is the space for? Is something that happens a lot earlier within that kind of design process. And the British Design Council, probably almost kind of 20 years ago at this stage, had kind of come up with this idea of, you know, that design is not a kind of a single linear process. It's this kind of double diamond kind of process where you kind of start and you actually start by exploring and discovering. You try to come up with a sort of a definition of what it is that you actually are hoping to achieve. And you don't start thinking about the equipment, and you don't start thinking about the bark on the ground or the floor or the surface or the height, all of those things, until you start kind of midway through, start to develop ideas and prototypes and concepts before you go and eventually then kind of go and deliver and kind of test it. But in order to do that, we need to kind of engage in thinking that is about design. So this morning, it is really about that early stage, being able to kind of think, okay, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? And really what you try and do is try and focus on two kind of thinking strategies. The first is to empathize with a view to trying to somehow kind of come up with a definition as to kind of what you want and what success actually kind of might look like. Okay, and there are various ways to do that. And usually what will happen is designers will kind of structure your thinking by asking questions, getting you to kind of play out kind of various kind of scenarios or whatever. And that's why you've got the tablecloths in front of you, to try and allow you guys to talk about what it is your aspirations might be, what it is you definitely want, what it is you definitely don't want, and what sort of ideas that you might actually kind of have. And at some point in the morning, what we'll do is we'll kind of come back and actually try and get you guys to encapsulate that in kind of 3 very short statements, short words, or even just kind of drawings, okay? Now, a lot of the time we do need to kind of, I suppose, kind of try and reflect back, I think particularly on some of the work that Alice was talking about today, and again with Roman and Emil just there a few seconds ago, is to try and keep in our minds where inclusion actually kind of fits in, and actually kind of use the process as well to try and think about what we're doing with inclusion in mind, okay? I think a lot of the time we talk about our criticism of poor design, a lot of the time is when we're reflecting back on an end product. And we're thinking to ourselves, well, why wasn't that inclusive? Why doesn't that playground allow kids, all kids to play? Why doesn't that particular piece of equipment kind of work for lots of kind of kids? And a lot of the time we're actually asking that question too late. So really this is an exercise in trying to kind of remind people that inclusion really in a design process is something that really starts at the start and should almost more importantly be considered in terms of what your vision for success is, rather than layered in at various kind of points further on, and certainly not as a retrospective kind of move after we've kind of finished and delivered the end product, okay? So just to kind of bear that in mind and to try and kind of think about those key goals and principles that Alice had been speaking about that are informed by the idea of trying to achieve a universality in terms of the design that we're doing. Okay, so people will talk about visioning design, and that's what we're going to try and kind of do this morning. Effectively, what's going to be in front of you is what designerly people call kind of vision boards and stuff, but it's a way to actually kind of capture what it is that your ambitions might actually be in terms of an inclusive kind of space, okay? This afternoon, what will happen is, I can't remember what the allocation is, but there are 4 locations that that each kind of group will be assigned. So the job will be effectively to kind of go to the space, see it, and try and imagine what an inclusive play space there would look like. But again, I just want to kind of remind people of some of the ideas that were kind of mentioned all morning about the idea of kind of considering kind of design as a journey and kind of thinking about it. And I think this is a great way to do it for people that can see the kind of the visual on screen, is to think about, you know, that kind of journey in terms of going to playground as not just starting the minute you walk through a gate or the minute you arrive at a slide or at a swing, but to kind of try and think about it from the point that you actually make that decision to, you know, leave your home as a family, as a person, as a child, and actually decide to kind of visit a playground. Okay, so Alice talked really beautifully earlier about that idea of playing along the way, you know, that idea of actually, what do you do when you're getting there? How can that be playful? You know, how can that be infused with a sort of sense of kind of fun and wonderment? So that the experience is actually kind of just moved beyond just that space and that equipment and actually is describing the overall experience. Okay, think about it in terms of, you know, getting there, the accessibility, the transportation, the timetabling, how much information a family might need in order to be able to kind of plan to kind of get there. What sort of information is going to reassure a family in terms of going to a place? Some of the stuff that's been mentioned in terms of kind of facilities that will support kind of, you know, kind of caring and kind of nurturing and those sort of activities. You know, making a decision about where you go to is sometimes based on how much you know about the place that you're going to go to begin with. Okay, so where does that kind of come from? And then thinking about that on-site experience, you know, what it looks like, what it feels like, even down to the things like Helen had kind of highlighted really beautifully earlier, the idea of kind of signage and how that signage actually kind of makes you feel. All right, what level are any barriers at? Okay, and what does that actually kind of communicate to you? And again, similarly, to think, okay, when the time comes that you're actually kind of leaving as a family, how easy, how seamless, how smooth can that actually kind of journey kind of back home be? Okay, so try and keep those things in mind, particularly this afternoon, okay, when you're actually kind of making your way to the assigned spaces. Okay, and some final kind of points to remember is just to try and think of possibilities, not problems. We can all get hung up on the idea of just getting focused on why we can't do something. All right. It's really important, I think, particularly in the early stages of design, to really try and focus on, like a lot of times referred as kind of blue sky thinking, that idea of trying to think what can be possible. Okay, so there are no bad ideas as you're writing and scribbling and drawing and whatever you're going to do on your tablecloths in a few minutes. There are no bad ideas. Okay. Secondly, to try and see the potential in a space. We just had a conversation just during the break there about what happens if a space is really small. You know, small spaces and big spaces all can present potential. They can all present problems, but I just want at this stage of the design for people to focus on the potential in particular. Okay, keep focus on your design vision, making sure that you have a sense as to kind of what are the values and what are the principles you're kind of bringing here. That idea of universality, that idea of inclusion. Keep conscious of your own perspective. We're all adults in the room for the most part. Okay, we're not kids and we're not children. Okay, so just be aware of your own perspective that you're bringing to it. And again, I'll emphasize it again, please focus on the possible. All right, so everybody has got a table in front of them. I would encourage, or I'd just suggest to people, I mean, you can do this sitting down, you can do this standing up, okay, you can kind of move around, okay, or whatever, okay. But right in front of you on the paper, just a series of kind of questions or statements, all right. We're going to ask you to try and sketch and write what your aspirations and objectives might be. Think about who the space is for, okay? Who might you be designing a play space for? Think about, this will be more pertinent, I think, when you kind of move kind of later on to the kind of site itself. What is the site and what are its characteristics? There will be kind of environmental characteristics that will lend itself to a particular type of play experience beyond, more than others. And these, I think, are really important things. Try to think about what it is you absolutely must have in that space. Okay, what is it that you would love, love, love to have in that space? And then finally, what would you really not like in that space? What's banned? What's outlawed? All right. So feel free to get up and move around, clear your tables, move coffee cups around the place. Coffee cups can become part of the installation if you want. But feel free to write or draw. And I'm going to just come back in about 15 minutes and try in 15 minutes to just kind of capture the exercise a little bit. Thank you.
Talk to the people online there. That's okay. So just for the people online, before you're allocated your spaces or your groups, you're going to be focusing on Marina Park. And I've sent resources to you on an email yesterday. There's a PDF attached to that. I'm just going to let Martha Halbert talk very quickly about the plan for Marina Park to you. And for there'll be two groups in this room that will be focusing on Marina Park. Two groups focusing on the new library in the city centre here in the room. Two groups focusing on Nano-Nagle Place and one group focusing on the Play Street in the city centre. So I'll come around to the groups here in the room while Martha's talking about Marina Park for the people online.
Okay, yep. Hi, online people. You're looking at the master plan slide there, where there's an outline of the different kind of purposes that are envisaged for this phase 2 of Marina Park. You'll see to the left-hand side of the graphic, you'll be able to see the outline of a stadium. The area around the stadium has already been developed under the Marina Park phase 1. What we're looking at now is moving, we'll say, east across that slide. There's an area of mixed use. There's woodland. That's obviously where the marina kind of promenade runs. It's adjacent to the River Lee. There is woodland, lawn area. We're looking at kind of a cultural aspect, woodland trails, different play amenities and so on. And just to give you kind of a scale of the space. So as I said, stadium there outlined, we'll say in red under active, that's a full scale hurling and football pitch. So you can see with associated stands and so on. Hopefully that can kind of give you a sense of the scale. If I move my mouse, this part here is the Atlantic Pond. So that's, I mean, we call a pond a little mini lake. So that's a water space. So there's space adjacent to fresh water. Here's the River Lee. This is a private garden, but other than that, this is all green space. The marina runs along here. So as you can see, it's very much kind of a mixed use, mixed purpose space. And what we're trying to consider is how we make that inclusive, how we make it a place that families and, you know, across the generational spectrum can enjoy, how they can access it safely, and how it becomes a space for play. If there's any questions, feel free to pop them up and I can try and fill you in. I know it's difficult when you're maybe not familiar with the marina and familiar with the community around it.
So for you online, you're going to go into your groups now. David S is going to split you up. You're possibly 2 or 3 groups, David S, and you're going to be looking at the Marina Park and the resources that you have there. And Grace will be dipping in and out to see how you're getting on and checking in on you. Thanks, Grace.
Okay, so it looks like people are coming back online, and we will just have maybe 5 minutes, 5 or 7 minutes or so, just to maybe kind of get some feedback from everybody. And just to, again, just kind of remind people that this isn't the end of the exercise in lots of ways. When you do go this afternoon and actually see the assigned places, what we want you to try and do is, I think, kind of keep in mind the discussions and the conversations that you've had, and try and maybe kind of see how your thinking maybe kind of changes or evolves or you know, or just maybe kind of sharpens based on actually kind of being in the space and seeing it, and maybe coming at it with, you know, hopefully new knowledge, some hopefully kind of new thoughts and understanding. So thanks to everybody online who got into their groups and stuff like that. Can I just ask that a person from each of the groups, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just writing the 3 words that represented some of the conversations that you were having within the chat, just as we go around the room and just start getting feedback from kind of people, okay? So I was going to start with the smallest group in the house, which is just on my right-hand side. So can I ask that you do 2 things? Just tell us the space that you had allocated, in fact, in terms of that geographical space, and then just kind of give us your 3 words and maybe just a little bit as to kind of why those words.
Sure, yeah. So we were working with the Marina Park, and the 3 words that we chose were wilderness, with a sort of parentheses of controlled wilderness, exploration, and curiosity. And so we thought one of the biggest strengths of the Marina Park was that it is a wild space and it's a green space, which there aren't very many of in Cork. We're also coming with the perspective of non-Cork natives, if my accent doesn't give that away. We're UCC students who are only here for the year. So this idea of what is unique about Cork and its beauty, but continuing that in a way that is accessible through the sort of controlled wilderness aspect of it. We also sort of continued that discussion of bark mulch, like how do you take a wild surface and grade it in a way that is accessible to groups of people who maybe find mobility difficult, but that still preserves that wildness and that sense of wonderment.
Fabulous, thanks a million. And just as we move anti-clockwise through the room, we've got Jeanette has, thanks, Jeanette has just put up kind of 3 words that represented her group: free, accessible, and open. All right, so if we move on to Thomas.
Yeah, we also had Marina Park, and our 3 words are, and please my group help me if I don't explain it right. We have nature escape, but also nature escape. So it is 1 word. You can play around with it. We have knocks and grannies for variety on different occupations. And we also have ignite the inner child. And this is more related to the experience of maybe what that we can be back and be a child again.
Super, thanks a million. And just the 3rd group, yeah.
Hi, we were the library in Cork, and there's a load of Cork natives on the table, so the tablecloth is full. And the 3 words we chose were community and in community. Sorry, we had sub-themes. Sorry, right. It was intergenerational and the context of the Cork Library itself. So not to just put a design brief for a library. We were thinking of the Cork Library and that space itself. Cultural then was about the mediums, the arts, the keeper of stories of the city and the keeper of the history. And knowledge was about knowledge in different senses. So that it holds knowledge, but not in that traditional open book sense, but it's a connector to knowledge about the community and how the library use the word gatekeeper, Catherine, but in a positive sense to other services. So we had very few don't wants, but there was lots of different ideas around the multi-use and multifunctional, but not to lose that central keeper of stories and knowledge.
Super, super. Thank you. Thanks very much. And one of the other groups online didn't actually manage to make 3 words, but this is really a lovely contribution. They chatted more about what they would love to see. So things like changing places, toilets, you know, like we said at the start of this, a good website with lots of information so that you can actually really equip people to make the right decisions or to, you know, have the right information to kind of decide what to do. And I think this is a really interesting one, to kind of cherish the spaces that teenagers use, to have it kind of calm, not commercialized, to have it intergenerational, you know, and informal, you know, gathering spaces. And I think another thing, I think, you know, we've talked a lot about kind of COVID lessons, but I think as we saw spaces, particularly spaces in close proximity to ourselves closing down and being inaccessible during COVID for whatever number of reasons, we also saw people reclaiming streets, reclaiming areas, reclaiming corners, and, you know, making it their space to play in whatever way they wanted. So I think that's a useful kind of lesson as well. So thank you. And if we move on to the next group, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Brian. This table, we were discussing Marlborough Street here in the city center of Cork. It's a street with pubs and businesses, which is open some hours of the day, where there's no traffic passing by, and some hours of the evening night it's closed because of deliveries to the business. So, and the whole idea behind our discussion was indeed reclaiming the streets for the people. The 3 words are, the first one is fun, animated, and intuitive. So we want to create a kind of play street which is really inviting people from different ages to come, to pass by, to have fun in many different ways, in a very intuitive way. The other word is that it's welcoming, it's giving you permission and it's open for play. And the third word is that it's evolving, so that it's changing over time, and that people who come into the city, who are probably might come for other reasons to the city center, that they are attracted by what's going on in the street, and they think, oh, maybe I like to come back because next month there's something else popping up. Is that a correct summary?
Well done. Thank you very much. Super.
Yeah, we had a Nano Nagel place, and I think it's a religious place, having a museum, but also green spaces and coffee around. And we discussed that it would be, or the aim of the place, I think, is to make it more playful for children. And we discussed that it would be great if they would incorporate the children and develop with the children together how they could make it more playful. And then we also discussed that the opportunities for the children should be interactive, especially also with the historical aspect they have, or the clothes they have from the nuns, I think. And then we also discussed to take into consideration the values of the organization with the religious background and the place.
Super. Thank you, Inez. And just before we go to the last table, Karen, another Karen online, had said that their group had Marina Park. And interesting, just I think maybe some of the similarities. There are 3 words or phrases where the first one was to be inclusive for all. The second one was then, natural as much as, as possible. And I think the third was really interesting, the idea of incorporating woodland. And that for some children, it possibly being the first contact that they might have with woodland. And I think that within urban environments, I think it's a challenge, but it's also just maybe an interesting aspiration, I think, to keep in mind. Thank you. And then the final group in the room.
We also had Nano Nago Place. So we have the convent with the organic gardens and the museum. And we were surprised at how somewhat similar we are. Our 3 words were interactive, historical, and inclusive. So the interactive piece, making sure there's not too many restrictions, that you can kind of manipulate and use items such as dress. The historical, looking at like the doing of history. So how you're acting out maybe some of the original occupations that people had, or, a shop or places that they did. And then inclusive, and we're going to have to see about this site, but we were really kind of worried about it being up on a hill and not having parking. But in a positive way, we're thinking, how could it be inclusive of building a community where people feel welcome? And so maybe there's some ownership of an organic garden or a plot, or even we talked about cameras around the place so that you could see your site at times when it was closed and kind of feel like that was your place. So that was
super. Thank you. And just a quick thank you to everybody online who contributed in their groups and then uploaded, obviously, their kind of thoughts in the chat as well. I think that's just been kind of really useful. I'm going to hand back to Denise at this stage and just finally thank everybody for taking part in the exercise and to enjoy this afternoon, those who are involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for stepping in so well. And Teresa, we're looking at you here saying, we hope Brian did a great job there for us in your absence. So thank you very much for stepping in last minute for us. There's not much else to do in terms of the content of the morning. I suppose it's to say to people, if you've any questions or any comments that you want to share with us, please post them in the chat box, or anyone in the room have any questions or any comments that they'd like to make in terms of this morning. It's been a fantastic morning with lots of richness, I think, from multiple perspectives. So just to invite you, if you do have something or a comment or a question, please feel free to do so. So Catherine Harford from Let's Grow Together.
Thanks for an amazing, energetic morning. I just suppose I just want to say one of the 3 sort of takeaways for me is play along the way. I'm hearing that here, as well as training I did with Urban 95 and also a couple of other spaces. And it's so important. You've mentioned about Nano Nagel there. What is the experience like on the way? And so I think we really need to start thinking about that in Cork, and the play affordances in everyday spaces and opportunities. And I suppose the last thing is users as experts. And I suppose from the piece that I'm coming from is children's voice and very young children being part of that and being visible in design, planning, but also in implementation. So testing, seeing what works and adapting. And I think it's they're things that are coming up here, but they're coming up in all our work and all of our different kind of voluntary spaces and in the way we live and work and play in Cork. And I think there are 3 themes that we need to really focus on, I think. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Well said. Martin, great. Martin O'Donoghue, chair of Let's Play Cork.
I think it's really interesting the morning, and it's really great to see so many different perspectives, not just from our city, but from beyond kind of looking at what we're doing and critiquing it and giving suggestions and bouncing ideas off us. So I'm really, I suppose, heartened by the level of discussion and just watching the different groups as we did that exercise, and looking at some of the contributions from online. It's an exciting space, this using play as a framework to try and animate all of our cities and all of our kind of urban spaces. So make the most out of the interactions, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing some of the ideas that kind of happened this morning grow to life over the next couple of years in Cork. So thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Martha?
I might just add that for those who are visiting Marina Park in the afternoon and the Play Street and the City Library, this is a conversation, but it is also a conversation that can be kind of harvested to feed back into this process. So the engineer who is working on Marina Park, Brian, who will meet us there, is at the start of a non-statutory consultation with stakeholders locally and further afield, and would welcome feedback. So I'll work to kind of collate what we discuss and what these two tables have discussed. And similarly, the City Librarian, David O'Brien, who's going to meet us with his colleague Patricia at the City Library, they're at the start of a very, very big capital project around redesigning the City Library. So this is an impactful piece of work that we're doing here to look at how inclusivity can be incorporated into those design pieces. So, this might not be a topic that otherwise is high on their list of priorities. So just to keep that in mind as well. It's very meaningful work at the moment.
Great. Thanks for that. I think that's a wonderful opportunity for us. So it's great that you're here with us. In terms of the people online, it was a pleasure to have you here with us on the screen, and it's lovely to see your faces. Thank you for participating. This was a maiden voyage on a hybrid event. Thank you, Grace, for supporting the groups and jumping in and out and looking after them. And of course to Davides, who is lovely and calm and helpful in the background. You've been fantastic. So it's been a great event in terms of the hybrid experience, and one we will try again so that we can engage people from all over the country. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to say goodbye to our lovely friends. Now, if I had a camera that I could move, I'd turn it around so you could see all these fabulous people waving at you, but you won't be able to see that. So I'm going to wave on their behalf. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be sharing the recording from the session with you all in the next number of days. And thank you, Davides, as well for organising the recording. And we'll send that to you, as I say, by email in the next few days. Goodbye, everyone online. I'm just going to talk to the people in the room now.